Saludos, te habla Hebreo del Cine Podcast y hoy tenemos un contenido súper exclusivo que dará de qué hablar en toda la nación. Junto a Carlos Mercader de La Diestra, entrevistamos a la reportera del Daily Mail que escribió el artículo sobre que supuestamente están presionando a Donald Trump para la independencia, pero ella nos clarifica todo.
The interest about writing about Puerto Rico. Where does it come from, and it's your belief that this is something that's been right now talked about in Washington D.C., whether it's the White House or Congress?
Okay, yeah. So this is something that came into my lap. Actually, I do cover border issues, but this came to my lap by a congressional office leaked this memo that they received that supposedly held this proposed executive order. And that fell into my lap. And then that kind of led me down the road of looking at the statehood versus independence movement. And that's where a lot of this interest is coming from the leaked memo.
So tell me about your experience about, the feedback that you've been getting since the story came out.
A lot of feedback from both sides. I've now talked to the statehood movement and I have talked to the independence movement. I didn't know that this was going to be something I'd be covering so in depth after the memo leaked, but it obviously has caused a lot of waves. This was drafted up by the independence movement and they were sending it around to the White House and to offices on Capitol Hill, trying to gain momentum for it. And one Capitol Hill office at least got their hands on it, felt like it was important enough to leak to show to the media and the American public that this is something that was circulating. And that's where I took it and reported on it, and have been getting a lot of feedback from people who are pro-statehood, pro-independence.
Yes. In Puerto Rico, we're passionate about this topic.
Yes. And one question, why in UK and not Daily Mail in United States? Why in UK?
So I am the Daily Mail in the United States. I'm based in Washington, D.C. I only report on American and U.S. politics. I don't do anything with the London office. We're two separate websites, and ours, the one that I publish, is on the United States side of the website. So this is all American politics centric, nothing to do with the UK.
Okay, all right, I understand. And which senator or congressman have this memo in the hand? Because here everybody talking one or two senator or congressman got the memo, but nobody tell the names. Which congressman and which officer in the White House got this memo?
So from what I'm hearing, there was a certified mail sent out. So they got confirmation that this physical document is in the hands of Donald Trump's office, Elon Musk's office, Tulsi Gabbard's office, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio's office. They didn't give me any more names besides that. They told me that they're going to be sending me names of some of the congressmen and women that have also received the document. So once I have that and I'm told I can make it public, I will, but I'm not going to make it public to protect my sourcing for
I
now.
feel you, but do you, in Puerto Rico, people ask to White House and nobody said they got the memo. The only source we got this official memo is from your article.
Yeah, so they did not release it or talk about it publicly. This was something that was sent through certified mail. So they got confirmation that the mail was at least delivered. I can't say
maybe at the White House mailroom. So maybe at the White House mailroom they got it, but it's not necessarily that it was on President Trump's desk.
Right, that's what I was going to say. I can't say whether they actually physically saw it, but their offices received it.
Okay. Yeah, no, and even in your article, you mentioned that I think you called the White House, and the White House first they didn't provide a comment, but also they said they didn't know of the origin of the document. That I think I'm quoting.
They're not aware of it.
Yeah. Okay.
Do you know Mr. Hernandez?
Yeah.
Do you know Mr. Hernandez?
I have spoken to Javier Hernandez. I don't know him personally, but I just spoke to him.
No. Sorry. I said Pablo Jose Hernandez, the
Resident Commissioner.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. So sorry. There's
no, don't worry. Hernandez, Rodriguez, Perez, very common last names down here.
Yeah, but Hernandez is
no, I do not know.
Oh, okay.
The Mr. Hernandez you're talking about. No, I'm not familiar.
But you know Javi Hernandez, the guy who write the article, right?
Yeah, so I spoke with him after I reported on it, and he's the one who has shed some light on how they sent certified mail and what offices they were corresponding with on this.
Okay.
Yeah, so one of the things that really created like this whole commotion about the story that you wrote is that the story said that Trump was being pressured, right, on signing this executive order. And with that, I think with the title of the story, down here in Puerto Rico, local media, you can read posts on social media or even in their reactions, whether it's TV or radio or even their YouTube shows. They were talking about this is imminent. This is something that the president, at any moment, just close your eyes, you open your eyes, and Puerto Rico's on its way to independence. So did you ever feel that? Did you ever feel that way, that that was the situation?
No, absolutely not. And in fact, it's very misleading to even call it an executive order. The president cannot unilaterally decide that Puerto Rico is going to get its independence tomorrow. That would take an act of Congress. Mm-hmm. This document was drafted by the Puerto Rican Alliance to try to pressure Congress and the White House to take it seriously. And when Congress leaked the document, and at least one or two offices were obviously like, oh, this looks pretty important, and they leaked it to the media and myself to be able to get it out in the public. But this was to create a pressure campaign for that independence movement on the White House and on Congress. But no, this is not something that I'm hearing from any sourcing within the White House that Trump is taking seriously or that he has even seen or heard of at this point.
No, but that's good. Ella tiene que ser una buena reportera, porque only you got the...
Exactly. Yeah. No, you have the information, actually. So you are the main source of information for all of the stories that have come out after your story. So and what you're just telling us right now, just that fact of that you haven't heard anything coming out from the White House. I'm sorry. It's important for what the discussion has been around in Puerto Rico. I participate.
I think an important thing to note. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say it's also important to note that the White House is looking to expand the United States right now. They are looking at Greenland. They're looking at the Panama Canal. They're even talking about making Canada a state. So I don't think that there's a imminent desire to be getting rid of any territories at this time.
Katelyn,
so that's
actually,
an important note as well.
That point that you're bringing out, it's super important. I've been talking about the expansion narrative that the Trump administration has been putting out ever since, even before swearing in, when he talked about the the Canal of Panama, when he talked about Greenland, when he talked plenty of other let's say
even Canada,
official expression. Yeah, even Canada, exactly. Canada states.
For me, it's a joke. For me, Canada is a joke. But.
Well, maybe, but it talks about a narrative that he's talking about expanding the U.S. Mm-hmm. and we haven't seen that recently from any other presidents.
Right. So I think that's highly important to note, because even if there is a pressure campaign for this independence, I don't think the White House would take it seriously. I think that the independence movement is trying to gain more notice through doing this. They're trying to get the document out in the public. They're proposing things like executive orders and task forces and things to go towards the independence of Puerto Rico. But obviously, like we said, there's a huge divide between people who want statehood and people who want independance.
No, here independence is 12%. Statehood is 58%. Right. So last week we got like 200 people from Puerto Rico talking from statehood, like promote statehood, and nobody do an article. But just a memo, they do an article. But that's good. That's good.
No, but I think, Katelyn, that when you talk about Puerto Rico politics, it's a situation of obviously status has always been the main let's say political controversy in the island. It's been we've been a colony or a territory of the United States since 1898, but before that we were a colony of the Spain. So the history has always the political status has always been the question or the main topic of discussion politically. And in Puerto Rico over the years, statehood has gained a lot of public support. When you go back to the plebiscites that have been done in Puerto Rico, statehood has been favored in all of them, in the most recent ones. And I think independence movement, they got maybe a boost in the last election because their main candidate got support. The main gubernatorial candidate got a public support that they hadn't gotten before. So I think that's why maybe you're seeing this, maybe some of them being very vocal, but in terms of support for the status, it's not there. Publicly, it's not there. It's mostly for statehood. Let me.
And I think it's another important thing to just mention is that a lot of times you see political offices, including like on Capitol Hill, where this document is coming from, trying to line things up with the things that are happening. And there were all those meetings that were happening between statehood advocates and lawmakers in Washington, D.C. just recently. So I think the timing is important to note that it likely was leaked around this time to correspond with that.
To react,
narrative. Exactly.
So, and let me ask you this, Katelyn. Now that you've been immersed into the Puerto Rico topic, that you've been talking with a lot of people that have something to do with Puerto Rico, and you've been asking around, is there any other issue that comes up whenever you talk about or you ask about maybe this political status of Puerto Rico or the executive order that some offices may be talking about? Maybe Promesa, maybe the debt, maybe the restructuring. I don't know.
I think for the most part, I'm seeing just that there's a shifting dynamic of who's supporting it. It used to be a very Democratic issue for statehood, and now we're seeing a huge shift towards like a lot more Republicans are coming on board with it. I think the island is leaning more Republican and more red all the time. We have now a Republican governor down there, and they're able to work with the U.S. better. I've gotten some very random comments on some of my posts about this of people saying, oh, I think it would be better for the U.S. to decouple from it and save the money that apparently is being proposed that would be saved in this. But there's $70 billion in interstate commerce between Puerto Rico and the U.S. every year. I think that financially it makes more sense to maintain a unit, but that's one of their arguments for trying to get towards the independent side of people that want that.
It's very interesting that in the title of your article, it talks about the $617 billion, and people were talking about it like, where does that amount of money comes from? And that was one question. Then the second question is, down here in Puerto Rico, the pro-independence movement, they always are like, their talking point is Puerto Rico gives more to the U.S. than the U.S. gives to Puerto Rico. But when you read the executive order, it basically says that because the U.S. spends so much money in Puerto Rico, it would be better for the American taxpayer to just cut ties with Puerto Rico and just give independence or sovereignty to Puerto Rico. It's super interesting because, again, I can quote maybe 4 or 5 voices in the pro-independence movement that's one of their main talking points. Oh, the U.S., they take out of Puerto Rico more than we take from the U.S. But then in the executive order, the narrative, it's totally the opposite.
Right. Interesting, because I didn't know about that narrative, obviously down with the independence movement in Puerto Rico, but it's very much seems like the executive order that was the fake executive order that was drafted by this group is trying to push it on Americans as a way to save money and that it would benefit taxpayers. So that is an interesting dichotomy that you mentioned. I can tell you the way that they did the math in this executive order is saying that over 50 years, this is what we're projected to spend on Puerto Rico. And in this new proposal, we're shortening it down to a 20-year transition period into independence. So that's where the $617 billion comes from. I think that's like the only math that they're going off of the projection versus 50 years versus 20 years.
Interesting.
Yo creo que estamos.
Sí, súper.
Sí.
No,
yeah. Wow. Thanks.
Katelyn,
Yes.
We thank you for your time, and it's been super interesting to having this conversation with you, and you give us a lot of insight into the original article, and then this whole discussion that's being held right now in DC, and we thank you for that.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. I'm going to keep reporting on this and trying to get to the bottom of all of it, so definitely keep following along.
Katelyn, let me ask you this, and you said something very interesting that I would love to hear some reporting on this, but you said that within the Republican Party, the support for statehood has been growing. That comes from your interaction with some Republicans up there in Capitol Hill, or that comes from conversations from Republicans from different states that may be tied to Puerto Rico?
So it's coming from some of the conversations I've had with people on Capitol Hill, and also the Puerto Rican, I think it's the Statehood Council.
Okay.
I've talked with them about some of the meetings that they're holding. And for example, like they just had Senator Mark Wayne Mullen, who's very conservative, come out and say that if there was a yes/no measure on statehood, he would vote yes. So that's just showing some of the sentiment on even the far right factions of the party leaning more towards it, when previously they thought statehood was damning them because it was going to be automatically two Democrats.
Exactly.
And that's
exactly
not the case anymore.
Not
So
the case anymore. Yes.
There's growing sentiment with that.
Yeah,
too.
no, and that's one thing that also good reporting would go long ways, which is the narrative has been leaning in nationwide that because Puerto Rican communities in Chicago, Puerto Rican communities in Philadelphia, Puerto Rican communities in New York, they've supported the Democrats. Then Puerto Rico is going to be a Democratic state. But then if you go to Florida and you compare the support that the Puerto Rican community, which it's pretty heavy, they've shifted towards, first when Rick Scott was governor, then he became senator, Marco Rubio senator, and then Ron DeSantis as the governor. It's been very interesting as to how the Puerto Rican electorate has demonstrated their support for conservatives in that state. And when you come down to Puerto Rico, you see you have a governor who's a Republican, you have a president of the Senate who's a Republican, a Speaker of the House who's a Republican. It really tells you about how that narrative, that nationwide narrative, it's false or it's a myth.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep, and it's massive. I traveled the country for the 2024 election. I spent a lot of time in Florida. I spent a lot of time in Pennsylvania. Even went up to New York a little bit. And yeah, the Puerto Rican and Hispanic community in general is massively leaning red, more towards Trump and Republicans. So I think as that sentiment starts to change, so does the sentiment among lawmakers that are open to it, and the Democrats are already very open to it. So if Republicans get on board, I don't see why this couldn't be something that actually is part of the conversation in the near future.
Well, again, Katelyn, thank you very much for your time. It's been a super good conversation, and we hope to talk soon.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll keep sending you my reporting. I think I'm just going to keep trucking ahead with it.
Yes.
Great. Well, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Awesome. Thanks for having me, guys.
No,
all right. Thank you.
Ahí estaba. Ella es la reportera, la escritora del artículo que ha causado conmoción sobre el tema de... ¿Ya viste lo que ella dijo? La orden ejecutiva fake. Lo dijo de la reportera.
Sí, ella misma.
Nosotros lo hemos dicho, pero lo dice Hebreo, lo dice Carlos Mercader, es que esos son... No, pero lo dijo la reportera.
¿Y qué dijo? Que Puerto Rico se está yendo por el lado republicano.
Bueno, no. Y que lo que ella ha ido corroborando es que en el sector republicano el apoyo a la estadidad ha aumentado. Eso es bien importante. Mira, honestamente, Hebreo, esto es tremendo trabajo y te voy a explicar por qué. Ella corroboró varias cosas. Primero, la Casa Blanca no tiene ni idea. Ella dice que lo único que hay es que el sobrecito verde, el ticket verde ese que dice correo certificado, que le llegó firmado. Así que posiblemente llegó a la oficina de correo de Casa Blanca, pero no, el presidente no lo tenía. Fíjate que cuando ella va a pedir una respuesta directa de Casa Blanca, ellos dicen, yo no sé lo que es eso. Ellos ni saben lo que es, ¿entiendes? Entonces, después de eso ella dice, obviamente esto lo escribieron los de la PRA, los pro independencia de Puerto Rico, están buscando apoyo. Y fíjate lo que dice, que algo que lo hayamos dicho tú y yo en cada uno de lo que producimos, que esto había sido en respuesta a lo que el movimiento estadista había hecho en Washington. Y ella misma lo dice, bueno, esto obviamente nos liquean porque se da dentro de la visita de los estadistas a D.C. ¿Entiendes? La misma reportera te lo está diciendo. Y después, ella misma llama a la orden ejecutiva fake. Mentira. No somos nosotros, es ella. Así que, honestamente,
sí,
creo
que ella desde el día que ella lo hizo, yo nunca la vi mal a ella, porque ella está reportando algo que le dieron.
Sí.
Fue el juego que hicieron. Pues si la independencia fuera así de fácil, Juan Dalmau hubiera hecho eso hace tiempo.
Exactamente.